All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you can see me okay. Um, this is my first live, and just trying to get through the struggle a little bit. Okay. So, for those of you who are joining in, my name is Charles, and this channel is appropriately named Moreland's Movement, and it's dedicated to leadership and everything that entails in leadership. So we're talking development, skills, training, mental health, all of that. But first and foremost, I got to give a couple of shout outs. First of all, I need to give honor to God for allowing me to be able to do this in the first place. I believe that because of Him, He has given me the tools and the skills that have allowed me to present these type of topics to you. I also want to give a shout out to one of my YouTube icons. Hopefully, one day be a mentor, El Guapo, um, who recently made a comment about us military folks um, presenting ourselves accordingly and not looking like we just came straight out of a duffel bag. So hopefully, I'm representing the non-duffel bag folks. And so for my military brothers and sisters, you guys will know what I'm talking about, particularly. I also want to thank my friends and family for supporting me on this journey. And hopefully everybody gets a little bit of some knowledge, maybe even a little bit of entertainment out of this. And hopefully you continue to follow me on this journey. Okay. So again, this channel is going to be dedicated strictly to leadership topics, and we'll get into an array of what those will actually look like. But for today's topic, we're actually going to focus on mentorship. And so I did a little bit of research, not just to just go off of my own experience, but I wanted to do a little bit of research in what the general consensus was when it came to leadership. And there's a couple of talking points that I'm going to talk about today before we end this session. And so, for those of you who don't know me, I am a 24-year retired veteran, which is where the majority of my experience comes from. And with that being said, mentoring soldiers for the general public would just be people is kind of like the bread and butter of what we do, right? And so it's important for us to understand why we do that, what the ramifications or the consequences from doing so entails, and what also could be a lack of doing so negatively impact an individual's growth, right? So, that being said, let's just talk about leadership in general, right? And so, not to insult anybody's intelligence or demean anyone's understanding, but I just took some of this from some sources that actually define what leadership is. So, right, leadership itself is dynamic and ever evolving skill that requires continuous growth and refinement. In the pursuit of effective leadership, mentorship programs play a pivotal role in shaping and guiding in emerging leaders. These programs provide a structured framework. What this says to me is if you're in a position of leadership, part of your responsibility to those that work for you or underneath you is to guide them with your knowledge in that space so that those individuals have an understanding of what it is to be like and what it should look like once they start getting into those levels, right? So in leadership, for a correction, in the military, for example, um, we all start out as basic soldiers, seamen, airmen, whatever the branch is that you fit into. And then as we promote into leadership roles, each level has a certain amount of responsibility that goes with those roles. The higher up you promote, the more responsibility, the more range that you have, the more contact that you have with the individuals that you're responsible for, and therefore your development of those that are coming up underneath you, excuse me, is going to be important, right? Because you may start out at a level that's simply a team leader, right? Or in some places, in some workplaces, you'll be a shift leader, right? And then you move up to the watch or a group leader, and so on and so forth, right? And so for each level that you move into, there are those in leadership roles underneath you that also need to be groomed into those spaces. Now, as you're promoting, there should be leaders above you that are actually doing the same thing. They should be grooming you for that next position, promotion, whatever the case may be, right? One of the reasons why this particular topic is so important to me personally is because over the span of 30 some odd years and a couple of different career choices, I've found a lot of good, but I've also found a lot of bad when it comes to mentorship and mentoring individuals, right? And so, one of the things that in particular kind of disturbed me a little bit is the mindset that we own our own self development. I think that there's some truth to that, but I don't think it's a 100% caveat, right? I don't think every individual should own 100% of their growth, because there are things that they're not going to know that leaders above them will. And that's where the leadership in those positions comes into play, right? If you're in a position where you're in charge of other leaders, particularly, it is important for you to make sure that you're getting your input and your feedback down to those leaders so that they can grow in a manner that moves them forward in their careers, right? If you just solely wash your hands and say, hey, it's all up to you to figure it out, that's the wrong answer, right? A lot of people will disagree with that concept, but I've also found that there are a huge amount of individuals that agree that this in particular is an important factor for those of us in leadership positions, because there are an abundant amount of groups on social media platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, and whatnot that specifically talk about this particular area specifically, right? Now, there's some other things that go into play, which we'll discuss, on other times of other, videos. But fundamentally, mentoring and mentorship is one of those base level skills that you need to have as a leader, right? For a multitude of reasons, right? And we're going to touch on a couple of them, but in a broad spec, it helps you engage with your employees, your staff, your soldiers. It also gets you involved in public speaking. right? Because you don't always have one-on-one conversations. You may be talking to groups, and some of those groups could involve hundreds of people, right? And so you have to be able to articulate yourself and your goals and the objectives to those individuals in a way that will help them not only understand what the end game is, but also understand what your goals are as their leader, right? Uh, so let's talk about the first topic: knowledge of transferable and skill development, right? One of the primary benefits of a mentorship program is the transfer of knowledge and skills from experienced leaders to their mentees. Seasoned leaders possess the wealth of practical insights and lessons learned through years of experience. And by engaging in mentorship relationships, emerging leaders can gain access to a reservoir of knowledge, enabling them to navigate challenges more effectively and make more informed decisions. So, what to me, this is what kind of like the beginning of what mentoring is about, right? You're taking all the knowledge that you gained over however many course of years you've been studying, training, learning how to be a leader, and now you're taking that information and you're giving it to someone else, right? Giving that information to other people will not only help them become better decision makers and eventually become good leaders, but it will also help you as the leader expound on your own knowledge, right? Because the more knowledge you share with other people, the more you're going to want to learn about those areas that you want them to know, right? If, for example, your niche is in human resources, right? As a human resource practitioner, once you start getting into leadership roles, you're going to want to be able to teach those who are coming into that field the things that they need to know at the entry level, and then eventually on other levels past that as they begin to grow in their own careers, right? For soldiers, it's important for us to teach them the basics of soldiering, right? Once they get the basics of soldiering, then we start teaching them their specialized skills. Once we start teaching them their specialized skills and they get their specialized skills, then we start teaching them leadership skills in forms of schools, education, and the whole nine, right? And every level of leadership they progress in, they learn more leadership skills than they did at the previous level, right? And so that's why sharing knowledge is important when you're working with your teams so that they can grow as you're growing. Because let's be honest, if you're in a leadership role, right, and you're not sharing the things that you know, especially if they're productive, they're efficient, they show that there are ways of doing things that are more productive than the way other people are doing it, why would you hold in that information and keep it from others so that they can't learn it? To me, that's real selfish. And as a leader, that's a very bad trait, at least in my opinion. Again, some may disagree with me, but that's my personal opinion on it. Because in my experience, particularly, right? I was a combat arms soldier, and part of our day to day or what we get paid for operation was to be deployed in a combat theater, do whatever that mission entailed, and then come back home. And so for me, being able to teach the folks that worked with me how to maneuver in that kind of environment was important because, as we all know, casualties of war happen, right? And it's important for leaders to have individuals behind them that can, in most cases, do what they do, if not better. Worst case scenario, leader falls, someone can step up and take their place, right? And that's just a realistic aspect of combat, right? And so one of the things that I used to do was take my soldiers in training before we even got to the combat element. What I would do in training was get them all together and start going through different phases of what we were there training for, right? And then asking them for their feedback on what would they do in this situation? What would they do in this situation? What would they do in this situation? And then what I would in turn do is share with them what I would do as their leader or what I'm going to do as their leader in those same situations so that they understand and they see the kind of logic that takes place at my level. So when I give them an order to do something, it makes sense to them, right? That's important, right? Because no matter what kind of job you're doing, it's always important to give people why, right? Just telling them, hey, go do such and such. Okay, why are we doing that? Well, because I said so. No, we're not doing that. Right? We're not getting into the mode of, some of us who are old enough remember, when your dad or your mama, told you, hey, go do such and such because I said so. Right? No, you have to explain to them why they're doing it this particular way. Right? That's why the sharing of information is important. Okay. Personalized guidance and support. Key words here: guidance and support. Leadership is often a lonely journey, and having a mentor provides a crucial support system. A mentor offers personalized guidance, helping mentees identify their strengths, weaknesses, and areas for improvement. This one-on-one, sometimes interaction, fosters a sense of trust and open communication, creating an environment where mentees feel comfortable seeking advice and sharing concerns. All right. So, one of the things that is important as a leader is your folks trusting the information that you're giving them. Right. You also want to have a structure of open dialogue with the individuals that you work with. Okay. There are some forms of leadership that work in a dictator kind of scenario, but not often, right? Most of us have to operate in teams, regardless of the size of the teams. You're working in teams, groups, right? And so it's important for the individuals that work for you to know that the information that you're sharing with them is good information, right? Having a level of trust in the decisions that you make is important. Excuse me. And that's where this comes into, right? So we already talked about transferring skills and why that's important. Guidance and support kind of goes hand in hand with that, right? Because as you're leading people, you're guiding them to a certain endpoint, right? And you're doing that through sharing and transferring your experiences to them so that they understand all of the elements of the operation itself. Okay. Next point, career advancement and networking. Almost goes without being said that good leaders develop good leaders. If you Now I know some people have had situations or they've been in places where they had some really, really bad supervisors, right? First, I want to make clear this is my personal opinion. There's information out there. Some of it contradicts it, some of it doesn't, right? You can be an okay supervisor and turn out to be a good leader. You cannot be a bad leader and be a good supervisor. Let me say that again. You cannot be a bad leader and be a good supervisor. It's important that you hold yourself as high accountability wise, if not higher, than those that are working for you. Right? Part of leadership at a fundamental level is to help future leaders, aspiring leaders, those to become leaders, to be as best of a leader that they can be, right? Mentoring is one of the easiest ways for that to take place. Now, there's other methods, there's other ways, there's self development, there's training, um, and whatnot. But mentoring someone is by far, I think, the easiest method to get to that place. Taking someone under your wing and developing them so that they in turn can develop someone else. That's what continues to grow this pool of leaders, good leaders, right? Give you a scenario. Better yet, I'm gonna tell you a story. So we had a lot of soldiers underneath us over the course of my career. And as I said before, part of my personal job was to ensure that there was always somebody behind me that I was mentoring to be able to take my place if they had to, right? And so there's an individual who promoted into the senior level leadership ranks that started out as one of those soldiers. And by happenstance, I happened to be reading um, a publication. It was kind of like a newspaper called the Army Times. And in that publication was an article written by one of those soldiers who was now a senior leader. And beknownst to me, um, there was an acknowledgement to myself and one of the other leaders that I worked real close with, um, that transferred our skills, our knowledge to them, that they took with them throughout their career and utilized in their own mentoring and developing of other leaders, right? That's the kind of impact that you want to have. You want to be able at some point someone to tell a story about how you positively impacted their life, their way of thinking as a leader based on what you gave to them. Okay? Building leadership confidence. That's kind of what I was getting into this about. Right? Confidence is the cornerstone of effective leadership. Mentorship programs play a crucial role in building the confidence of emerging leaders by affirming their abilities and providing constructive feedback. Mentors serve as role models, demonstrating the qualities of successful leaders and instilling a sense of self assurance in their mentees. The confidence boost translates into more assertive and resilient leadership. I don't know how else to explain it outside of that, because it goes in line with everything that I've talked about up to this point, right? As a mentor, your guidance, your input, your knowledge that you imprint on another person is what can make them a future leader. And not just a future leader, but a good leader, one who makes good decisions, one who has self confidence, one who is self assured in their abilities to do what they're supposed to do day in and day out. How would one feel if the person who was supposed to be mentoring you was never really involved in your growth, never really tried to put um, development in your career as a priority? Would you feel compelled to come to that individual with questions about whether, if you're already at a leadership position or the next level of leadership positions, what you needed to know? Probably not, right? And so therefore, that's why these particular topics, when it comes to mentoring, are so important, right? Succession planning and an organizational continuity. Some big words, right? So for organizations, mentorship programs contribute to succession planning and the continuity of leadership excellence. By investing in the development of emerging leaders, organizations ensure a pipeline of capable individuals ready to take on leadership roles. This proactive approach to leadership development mitigates the risk associated with leadership gaps and fosters a culture of continuous improvement within the organization. Right. So, in simple terms, right? An organization that embodies mentorship programs actually promotes leaders to help develop future leaders, right? And there's a myriad of ways that they can do that. Um, and it just depends on the organization themselves, right? But fundamentally, it's it's a goal of the organization to have effective leaders throughout their structure so that the organization itself grows, right? And I've been in places where that's not always been the case, right? They may say that, it may even be written somewhere that that's the case, but in application, not so much, right? And so that kind of brings me back to that point about, you know, you being 100% in charge of your own development, right? If an organization is engaged in mentoring programs, self development on the individual will never be 100% on their own. Someone in that organization has the responsibility to mentor that person. Now, it may not be the immediate leader, it could be two levels up, it could be someone else within the organization, but somebody has to have that purpose, right? And one of the most intriguing programs that I found outside of the military structure was um, a mentoring program that took military individuals and paired them with other military individuals who were exiting out of the military. And I think this is good for several reasons, right? One, most of the mentors were senior individuals who had been in the military for a while, so they understood military jargon, concepts, rank structure and whatnot. But they also were involved in the corporate world long enough to understand how to navigate between the two, because a lot of people, especially young military folks, get lost in the transition between, the military and non-military. One of the hardest things I found personally was how to translate your skill set into terms that the average person would understand, right? We use a lot of acronyms in the military, a lot of technical terms. And so being able to explain some of the tasks or some of the knowledge that we have is kind of a transition that you have to go through in order to have people who have never been in the military understand what you actually could do, right? And that's kind of where that comes into play. And so it's important, right? It's also important that organizations who have these programs actually allow individuals who are involved in um, these programs to actually excel in them. Uh-oh. Okay. Right. And so sometimes some organizations don't always, follow through with that. And I've seen discussions especially on LinkedIn, where there have been individuals who worked for companies, that just didn't have a good foundation when it came to that kind of operation, right? They had, some of them may not even had actual mentorship programs. Some of them may have mentorship programs, but they call it something else, right? And in either case, um, a lot of individuals have felt disingenuine with the organization when it came to the way they developed leaders in their organization, right? Um, and so that's why I particularly want to focus on this space, because I think it's important, not only for leaders who are already in positions, but for those who are looking to get into the positions, or those that are moving through the positions of leadership, that they understand that there are people out here who want to help them grow, right? Now, I'm one of those guys. If in any form or fashion I can help you grow in your leadership journey, then that's what I want to do. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be, the Elon Musk, expert of what leadership looks like. But I do have enough experience, and I've been given enough opportunities and the talent to understand and recognize when something is not the way it should be. Right. And so, um, I just want to thank you guys for joining me on introductory, this journey. I hope you continue to join me on this journey, because we're going to get into a lot of things when it comes to leadership, right? One of the things that I also think are very important that aren't always talked about is the mental health of leadership, right? And which we'll get into that. But again, my name is Charles. This is Moreland's Movement. I hope you took something away from this introduction, and I hope you come back to find out more. With that being said, thank you for your time, and stay blessed.